Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm so pleased to be joined by Jillian Carrier, who is a commercial auto litigation claims adjuster and an Air Force spouse. Hi, Jillian. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today.
So Jillian is laughing a little bit and I'm laughing a little bit because this is our third take because every time we have a take, we're getting some kind of interference and it literally sounded like we had a DJ join us in the other take. So Jillian, thank you for being such a good sport. I want to make sure that everybody knows a little bit about you because I don't want to make the assumption that everybody has read your military spouse highlight. So could you tell everybody a little bit about your career so that they don't make the assumption that everything has just worked out swimmingly your entire life for you?
Absolutely, Sue. So I'm in the insurance career field, and I started in the insurance career field back in 2002, which is pre-marrying my husband. Then I married him in 2009. So I had been working in my career for 7 years um, prior to getting married, and then finding out we had PCS orders to relocate. So at that point in our life, it was time to pick up and move on to our next duty station, which meant that I was going to have to leave behind my career because back then, dating myself, there was no remote opportunities at that time. So it wasn't just moving and taking my job with me, it was leaving the actual physical location as well as the company, which was really hard for me to handle as far as saying goodbye to all the work that I had put in over all those years. But I did know that I needed to be with my husband. So at that point, duty calls, and whenever and wherever the Air Force says it's time to go, we picked up and went. So at that point, I was unable to find a job in the insurance career field, which was super disheartening for me because I did enjoy what I was doing, which is why I'm back in that career field now. But I did start working at a local school because, like everybody else, military spouses, we have to get ourselves back out there in the job market. I did work at a local elementary. I put myself into grad school. During the time there, I realized that was not the career that I, for myself, wanted to do long term. I did want to go back into the insurance career field. So at that point, I left, education behind me. I decided once we got resettled at our next location, I was going back into insurance. Since then, we moved, and I had let my property and casualty license expire, which is something that I chose I would never do again. I got that reinstated, went back into insurance again. And then since then, I have just been flying through insurance career field, working remotely. I was able to get finished with graduate school, and just kind of with every move, take my job with me. The only time that I really had a lot of regret and resentment probably was whenever I wanted to go to law school after finishing graduate school and finding out our next duty station was several hours away from the school. I did have to make a decision that was best for my family, even though it was something I wanted for my personal career and growth, to go ahead and not go through with that additional education. So I do feel that setting career goals is important, but if we don't reach them, we have to be flexible. We have to pivot. We just have to go with the flow as a military spouse and just be present.
No, and I love it because I mean, your story resonates, I'm sure, with a lot of spouses, but it definitely resonates with me. And, I love what you said about, you were like, I'm aging myself. You said you were aging yourself because your remote work didn't exist back then. But I would age myself even more, but we won't even go there. With the benefit of hindsight, because at the time, if you had had the ability to work remotely, you would have been able to stay in the field. And then now you do have the ability to work remotely. And so that has allowed you to have the flexibility you need to be able to maintain your career. So I guess my question to you would be, with the benefit of hindsight, and because you have seen the gamut, how far do you think we've come when it comes to evolving with the times around spouse employment issues?
Absolutely. So looking back, just the 15 years that I've been a military spouse, I really think we've come a long way in recognizing that military spouses do desire to be gainfully employed, and as well as the challenges and misconceptions that they face as far as pursuing those goals for their own career alongside their service members. There's a lot of ambition. There's a lot of go-getters. While there is still like that, traditional roles, taking care of the house and being there while your spouse or, service members deployed and TDYs, spouses are taking on that extra career as well. I knew for myself personally that when I got married, I wanted to continue to have a career alongside my husband throughout the military journey. Um, we as military spouses bring a wealth of knowledge, experience, resilience, adaptability. We're dedicated, but then we're still highly underemployed in comparison to the national US
Yeah.
average. There are still there is still room for improvement, because the unique lifestyle of military families and all of the relocations that we all go through, there's gaps in employment. It makes it hard for us to build our career path, competing in the job market, restarting, stopping with every
Right.
move. So continuing to address these issues is critical in fostering a more inclusive and supportive environment for military families. Um, I think that we are moving the needle in the right direction, though, in helping military spouses who wish to pursue their career and keep it alongside, with every PCS. It's much easier once you get into a company to stay with the company. It's beneficial for both the employee, the military spouse, and the company. Um, but there are still going to be challenges. Not every employer offers remote work. Not every career field you can work remotely from. So I think just basically having the resources and programs and networks available, which we have tremendous support now as opposed to 15, 20, 30 years ago. Um, Companies want to employ military members and spouses.
Yeah, and you know what? You bring up a really great point, and it also seems like the society's evolving. We talked about this earlier, when we were chatting, and society's evolving to where the experiences of employers writ large, not just military spouses, are starting to like look more like the military spouse experience because no one's staying at a job for 20 years anymore. I don't want to say no one, but very few are staying at jobs for 20 years anymore. And people are moving around more frequently. At least with a military spouse, they know that what they're getting is somebody who's not going to be looking for that next job while they're working there. They're like just looking to do a really great job while they're there. And even in your industry, because you were in the insurance industry and you were saying that at the beginning you couldn't stay because remote wasn't a possibility. And now you're back in the insurance industry and you're able to stay because remote is a possibility. So I love that. Like I feel like you've gone full circle, right? So, having said that, and like you had to pivot several times. And, one thing I always wonder, because it's come up a lot with the conversations we've been having, is, military spouses and their ability to pivot. But one thing I've not asked anybody is how much did strategy play into your career trajectory? I mean, like, are you just doing the pivots in a reactionary way where, as something comes up and then you're at a pivot point, you just have to figure out what to do next? Or is there a strategy to it all? I mean, did you have career goals that you were continually working towards, or did you just go step by step?
I think that my strategy played a significant role in my career trajectory. But when plans changed, I did have to adapt and then take one step at a time. Um, I'm a very organized person. I like to plan ahead, but I knew wanting to maintain my career alongside my husband's from the beginning that there's always the original plan, then there's the next plan, and then sometimes you're back to the original plan with the military.
Yeah.
I think just being adaptable, you can have career goals, but they may not be reached at the time that you want them necessarily. So there's no right or wrong way as long as you're continuously working towards those goals. It's important to be resilient to change. It's important to adapt to your surroundings, and then you just make the best of the situation at hand.
Yeah. And then I think that's really important. I'm gonna put a pin in that because I'm gonna ask you a question at the end about that because I think it just, you just mentioned it glibly, like this is a skill set that everybody develops, and I don't think it is. But I want to ask you one more question before we get to that. You talked a little bit about employers out there looking to hire military spouses because they see that we bring this ability and these value sets that they should really want, right? Um, But what for military spouses out there who are looking to come on with a military spouse friendly employer, how do they identify that? Like, tell us more about recognizing when an employer is or isn't military friendly.
Nowadays, with social media being so prevalent, there are a lot of postings and there's a lot of signs that basically recognize when an organization is military friendly or not. I did do some volunteering with Hire Heroes USA, and more companies were seeking out veterans and spouses. Their job postings would welcome veterans and spouses to apply. They would put for a prerequisite or desired qualification, prior military experience, organization post job fairs on military installations. Your candidate pool is going to be all military affiliated, spouses, dependents, veterans. So I do think having those resources available is a lot more accessible to people to apply for those jobs. And then Skillbridge has been fairly new opportunity for military members, not spouses, that members transitioning out of the military to partner with the organization while they're still on active duty, and they're able to gain civilian work experience, and then networking, of course, with spouses who are already in jobs is another one where spouses connect with spouses, like, hey, I'm looking for a job. These are my skills. And then we're able to network amongst each other. So like my company is military friendly.
Right.
Some other companies I've worked for are extremely military friendly. And they do like hiring spouses. They know that you're hardworking. They know that you're resilient. They know that you're adaptable. Um, and I just think that there's so many companies, um, even if it doesn't say it, they're just very supportive of military in general.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the greatest evolutions is all the social media platforms available to us, like LinkedIn, where, like military spouse professionals are now networking on LinkedIn, which is fantastic. Cause I remember when we started NMSN, like networking was such a taboo topic. Like the spouses were like, we do not network for jobs. And I'm like, I don't understand why not, because it's just a natural extension of networking for, the best schools, the best churches, the best, whatevers, right? Neighborhoods, but they just stopped short of networking for career. And so it's so great to see how we've evolved to actually actively networking on social media platforms before we get to the installation. Cause I think that was the hardest part of being military spouses. Like you knew you were only in a place for like 18 months to 3 years. So by the time you were comfortable in your network, it was time to go look for another job. And we always had to wait till we got to the next installation. But now we don't have to wait because we have these networks that we feed throughout the year. And then, like, we can start looking for the Facebook groups for that. Like you already know where you're moving to. And so you could look at, like those Facebook groups then, and you could look, start asking the spouses there where, hey, what are the must join places or groups for professional military spouses, or hey, what's the best networking event in the area, which I think is so amazing. So I think I want to go back to what I said. I kind of teased that I was going to ask you this last question about resilience. I think all this feeds into developing more resilient military spouses because we have better resources now. But I admitted to Jillian that, like, when I was first married and a bazillion years ago, and I was not very successful in looking for a job, I was really resentful and I wasn't that resilient because I just didn't see the plus side of stuff. And I don't think I developed that reflex, that resiliency. And maybe it's because, Jillian, you were a military brat. Maybe it's because like you had a role model in your mom and other military spouses. But I don't think I had that. And I don't I don't know that I could crack the code for military spouses nowadays about what like what it takes to become resilient in the face of like the perpetual job search and so on. So what made you so resilient? Because like reading your story, you can clearly tell that, like, okay, I love the insurance industry, but I can't stay in there. So I'm going to go get a graduate degree in education. I'm going to go work in the education field. And then you realize, you know what? No, I don't like this. I want to go back to the insurance field, which I loved, and I'm going to go back to grad school for that. Like, you clearly never wallowed and you just kept moving forward. What is it that makes you so resilient? And what can other military spouses learn from your story and your experiences?
I think just honestly being able to understand ourselves as people and what we can and can't control. There are some things that we can control, like what are our skills? What are we good at? Things that we can't control. We're a military spouse. We know that. Our husband or our wife, whoever serves, we know that they're going to move. That's a fact. So controlling what we can control and then adapting to where we're going next. I honestly think just staying flexible, open-minded, and positive. I think just staying positive. There's always going to be something. It may not be what you want at the time that you want it, but you continue to work towards it, and you're going to get there. I mean, it didn't happen for me during the one PCS. Like you said, I had to work at the school in the interim, but I knew that I wanted to have a career again. I didn't want to just be sitting around and waiting for something to pop up that wasn't going to pop up. We were in a small town. I was not going to be able to find um, a big job out there. So I do think just staying positive, adapting, being flexible, and just going with the flow, honestly, Sue.
And you also had to make tough choices because you also chose to geobatch.
Yes, we did.
So sometimes it's also like, hey, going with the flow, but also recognizing that you're going to be at an inflection point where you're going to have to make a choice. And so I think sometimes we see all these military spouse professionals out there and they look like the swans gliding on the water, like very calm. And underneath, you're like paddling like crazy. And I think I've met so many peers who are like, I geobatched twice, and like Nicole Murray, and she geobatched for X number of assignments because she had a killer job. And she's like, that was something we chose to do. And it wasn't easy because, like she had a pregnancy and then, like she had complications. And I think of other people and you geobatch with your kids. And I mean, I'm like, I think that's what we need to understand because Jillian and I were talking about it earlier, and we're like, I was telling her that what has been remarkable for me in talking to all these amazing military spouses is the theme that comes across is we don't always give ourselves the grace that we give to other people. And so we're really hard on ourselves and we're really hard on other spouses going, oh, they just had it really easy. I'm like, no, I mean, Jillian may look like she had it easy, but she geobatched and she switched career fields and she went back. And so, I mean, I think bravo to you. And I think that's one thing is, yeah, like just understand that we have to be flexible. And we were joking, about flexibility being the key to air power. But earlier I'd interviewed Melissa St. Clair and she's a Marine spouse and she's like Semper Gumby. And so it seems like no matter what service branch you're attached to, we have some way of saying be flexible. And that's insane. But thank you so much, Jillian. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. And thank you to our friends over at USAA for making these conversations possible. And I hope to see you guys back here next week when we will share another story of another fabulous military spouse. Thanks, guys.